Today, we become legends.
One random fact about every Smite god, let's go. Achilles. The protection buff from Radiant Glory, Achilles 2, can bypass the normal protection cap of 325. This trait is shared with Corrupted Bluestone, Fafnir's passive, and a handful of others. Agni. Agni's dance emote is based on Bhangra, a traditional folk dance from India done in the harvest season. AMC. Excluding special cases like stance switchers and multi-shot ultimates like Agni, Amuzen Cap has the lowest ultimate cooldown in the game when he picks up his stinger at just 40 seconds, which was as low as 18 seconds not too long ago. Apwash can 100% anti-heal just with abilities and no assistance from items. Amaterasu. Along with Ganesha and to a certain extent Arachne, Amaterasu's ultimate is one of the only cases of a direct reuse of an ability from an old god design, that being Guan Yu's original ultimate, Tactician's Advantage. Anhur. Anhur is voiced by Christopher Sabat, the same person who voices Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z. He has also voiced Fafnir, Hebo, Geb, and some skins in Smite. Anubis. Discounting game-wide nerfs like the 10.3 healing overhaul, Anubis has never actually been nerfed despite being one of the original 9 gods showcased in Smite's alpha in 2011. Ao is the only god to have an achievement that requires the presence of another specific god in the match. He has to execute an enemy under the effect of Khepri's ultimate. Aphrodite is the god with the most total skins in Smite, with 30 not including her default. Yes, Neith actually has slightly less than Aphro at only 28 not including her default. Apollo can stay airborne in his ultimate for a maximum of 44 seconds regardless of if he still has mana at that point. This costs 2440 mana in total, more than double the next most expensive ability in Kabrakan's Tremors. Arachne was originally human, but became a spider after she bested Athena in a weaving competition by depicting her father Zeus in his many infidelities with mortals. Athena was so enraged that she cursed Arachne to live as a spider from then on. Ares has the most harsh single non-conquest balance change of any god, with his ultimate having a 30% increased cooldown when used in non-conquest modes, taking it from a 90-second cooldown to 117 seconds. Artemis. Since the changes to CC in Smite patch 9.7, Artemis's route on her traps will now be reduced in duration by diminishing returns, as it is now a hard CC, but the cripple, which is still a soft CC, will not be reduced, which makes for an interesting interaction where you can be completely unrooted and out of the trap but still be crippled, though I guess on a lore sense this does kind of work since the vines might have crippled you even after you've escaped them. Artio. With the healing changes in patch 10.3 that made no heal scale with power anymore, Artio's 1 is technically the largest normal heal in the game, as it heals 200 health per enemy god hit, meaning it can heal 1000 health to every ally in range if used on the whole team. Athena was the first god introduced to have a taunt CC. Atlas. Along with Maui, Nuwa, and Terra, Atlas is the only god to have a direct CC on his passive. Interestingly, these are all tied to the god's basic attacks. Awilix has a custom animation if she is feared while riding Suku, and this is a reference to Scooby-Doo and looks hilarious. Baba Yaga was originally teased before release by her laugh playing whenever a player used a potion. A similar thing was done with Medusa and Cerberus, as statues of them appeared in the Conquest map before their actual release. Bacchus. As Bacchus gets more drunk from his 1, his laugh, taunt, and joke voice lines change to become more rowdy and slurred.
I could really use a drink. I think I'm feeling it. Feeling tipsy. Listen! I got a singer for you.
Bakasura. The minions Bakasura regurgitates in his ultimate are unique to him, but that wasn't always the case. For a while on his original release, he would actually vomit up the exact minions or jungle monsters he ate to charge the ultimate. Yes, Baka could technically metagame it to throw up 6 brute minions or 6 large jungle monsters when he ulted. Pretty terrifying. This was changed about a year and a half into his existence in Smite. Bake Kujira. Bake is the only god to have basic attacks that hit in a 360-degree arc around him. All other AoE basic attacks are either cleaves in front of the god like Guan Yu, or splash damage AoEs around the target like Freya. Baron Samedi. Along with Baba Yaga and Ratatoska, Baron is one of the only gods in the game to have a unique item associated with him specifically, not counting things like Kronos Pendant or Book of Thoth of course. Bastet. Bastet's original passive she released with in the 2011 alpha build of Smite was called 9 lives and gave her a 25% reduced respawn timer for her first 9 deaths of the game. Bellona. Bellona was the first god introduced to have a disarm CC. Kabrakan. A classic classic one here, Cabrakan has by far the highest total damaging non-ultimate ability in the game, with his tremors being capable of 1218 base damage and a whopping 735% of magical power if left on for the full 10-second duration. Kamazots. The Jurassic and Pterodactyl skins for Kamazots, along with Drums Out Raijin and the Demigorgon Bakasura, are the only skins to not feature any actual spoken lines for the voice packs, much to the annoyance of their teammates. Cerberus. Ghastly Breath, Cerberus' second ability, has the highest flat reduction to protections of any ability in the game, shredding 51 magical protections in total. Kronos. Kronos was the first god in the game to have a polymorph CC. Chak holds the record for the most concurrent individual voice lines for abilities in the entire game, with his 1 having 9 different grunt voice lines and his 2 having 8, all active and used interchangeably at once. At least it gives some variety to that 1-2 combo. Changa. Alongside Cabrakan's 2 and Sobek's ultimate, Changa's Moonlit Waltz is one of few abilities in the game that can cost negative mana, aka it refunds mana to cast the ability. Charon. Charon has technically been featured in Smite since 2018, with him appearing on Cerberus' recolor card art a full 5 years before his actual release, though he definitely does look quite a bit different here. Charybdis. Charybdis, along with Iset, Heimdall, and the Morrigan, are one of the only gods to have ranged basic attacks with a unique attack chain. Chernobog. Chernobog is voiced by Doug Cockle, the same person who voices Geralt in the Witcher video game series. Doug has also voiced the Totem Caller Hu Yi tier 5 skin. Chiron. The Constable Moose Jaw skin for Chiron makes reference to South Park's Terrence and Phillip with some of his voice lines.
You're not my friend, guy.
I'm not your buddy, friend. He's not your friend, guy. I'm not your guy, buddy.
Kronos. Kronos' ultimate rewind used to be cancelable during the wind-up, which probably led to some very interesting bait plays back in the day. Cliodhna. Cliodhna was the first god introduced to have a deafen CC. Cthulhu. Cthulhu is, by Hyra's own statement, the most popular god release Smite has ever experienced, with his reveal trailer having over 1.3 million views on YouTube. This is likely a combination of him being very highly requested, well-known in pop culture outside of Smite, and released during the pandemic when everyone and their mother was gaming. Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn was the first god in Smite to not use mana. Yamoja was the second, and Thanatos is the third, but only in Smite 2. Cupid. Cupid is the only god to have changed damage type and then changed back. He was originally physical and a hunter, then became magical and a mage for 2 patches before being reverted back to a physical hunter, which he has remained to this day. Daji. Daji's 3 Trickster Spirit will land you in front of the enemy if you are facing them, but behind the enemy if you are facing away from them. This allows you to land behind the target if you do a quick 180 in the startup animation. Danzaburou. The sake bottles hanging on Danzaburou's waist are supposedly a reference to how tanukis are often depicted with large hanging testicles. Yeah. Discordia. Discordia is the only god in the game that has a unique walking animation, or floating animation I suppose, for all 8 movement directions. Erlang Shen. Erlang Shen's 72 transformations is the only ability in the game that shares its exact name with another, that of course being Wukong's version. Iset. Discounting god changes like Aokwang to Kukulkan or Sun Wukong to Hunbats, Iset is the only god who has changed name after her release. Bonus fact, Bacchus' name was changed before release as he was originally going to be his Greek counterpart Dionysus, and his files still reference to him as Dionysus in many instances. Fafnir. Fafnir's 2 is unique in that it is an ally buff that can trigger Fafnir's own item effects, meaning allies can trigger items like Gem of Isolation on enemies with their basic attacks if buffed by Fafnir's 2. Fenrir. In Fenrir's tier 5 skin, Alpha Pack, each rider has a different wolf. One is Fenrir, but the other 2 are Fenrir's sons, Skoll and Hati, which chase Sol and Mani across the sky in Norse mythology. Freya. Freya is the most reworked god in Smite history, with her receiving 3 different reworks in total. She is also the only god to have a rework entirely reverted. Ganesha. Along with Maman Brigitte, Ganesha has one of the only dashes that can go through player-made walls. Geb. With his passive and spectral armor, Geb can reach 105% reduced critical strike bonus damage, meaning he is effectively immune to being crit, even if the enemy has Deathbringer. Gilgamesh. Alongside Ratatoskr and Changa, Gilgamesh is one of the only gods in Smite that can acquire items from outside of the fountain. Guan Yu. We all know release Guan Yu was no joke, but Guan alongside Kali, Rama, and Tia are the only gods in the game that don't actually make jokes with their joke voice lines. Hachiman. So a bit of a cop-out one here, but I had nothing better for Hachiman. The Japanese are the only pantheon in Smite that commonly uses their native tongue in voice lines.
Yoku dekimashita.
Hades. Hades is the only case where a skin replaced his original model. The Nightmare skin was a replacement for his default model in the Chinese version of Smite, but was released as a skin in all other versions of the game. In closed beta, this skin replaced the default Hades model in all versions, which itself became a skin called Classic Hades. Hebo. Lord of the Amazon Hebo is currently the only skin in the game that uses a non-English language for the entirety of its voice lines, regardless of your game language.
Ataquem, pequeninas!
Heimdall. Alongside Aphrodite's 1, Susanoo's 3, Morrigan's ultimate, and Fenrir's 1, Heimdall's 3 is one of the few abilities in the game that have a variable cooldown depending on how you use it. Hel. Hel was the first stand-switching god added to Smite as she was available in the original alpha build of the game showcased in 2011. Hera. Hera's 2 will polymorph enemies into jungle monsters from the specific game mode you're playing in, not just random ones. Hercules. Herc's 2 has been the source of many bugs and strange interactions over the years, such as with Poseidon's 1 that could launch enemies ridiculously far if they both hit at the same time, a Horus ult teleporting the Hercules at the way at the very moment his 2 hits, and many more janky interactions, some of which still work and some of which have been fixed. Horus. Along with Set, these are the only 2 gods that have a specific gameplay interaction when fighting each other, with Horus gaining double the amount of passive stacks from being hit by Set, and Set gaining double passive stacks from hitting Horus. These 2 were also the first and so far only double god release in Smite history. Hu Yi. Players using the Moon's Groom Hu Yi skin will always appear in the first position of the loading screen, while players using the Sun's Bride Changa skin will always appear in the second position, to make sure anyone using these pair of skins are displayed together, which is of course a reference to their lore. Hunbat's. Hunbat's weird and bizarre taunts and jokes are references to old Mayan proverbs that supposedly hold wisdom. I'll take their word for it, I guess.
It is not wise to put a basket on your head, as you will be eaten by a dog.
Ishtar. Discounting Discordia, Ishtar is the only god in the game to have unique side strafe animations. Ishel. Among others like Rama's Astral Arrows or Hachiman's Eagle Eye, Ishel can hit towers from outside of their attack range using her passive boosted basic attack. Izanami. Alongside Oleron, Izanami is one of the only 2 gods that have unique power scaling on their basic attacks rather than the standard 100% for physical and 20% for magical power. She has 75% on the way out and 35% on the way back for a total of 110% power scaling, while Oleron gets a 5% boost from his passive for a total of 25% power scaling. Janus. For a long time in the game, the supposedly purely cosmetic spacebar jump could actually be used to jump over Janus's portals and be unaffected by them. You could do a similar thing with Mercury's ultimate as well. Jingwei. Jingwei is the only god in the game that can act out of knockups. Jormungandr. Jormungandr is the physically tallest god in the game, but Cthulhu is the physically largest. Kali. Kali is the most controversial god ever added to Smite, with her original depiction causing quite a stir among some Hindus who believed it was too pornographic and violent. This is part of why she received a remodel so quickly after her original release. Khepri. It's well known that Khepri's ultimate can't block execute effects, but it actually can in one case, that being Ao Kuang's ultimate. Because his ult stuns you before dealing the executing blow, Khepri's ultimate can cleanse that stun and stop the execute from hitting. King Arthur. Alongside Jormungandr, King Arthur is one of the only 2 gods in the game that cannot increase his attack speed in any way. Loki. Alongside Cupid, Loki is one of the only 2 gods to have multiple standard recolor skins purchasable with favor. Maman Brigitte. Maman is the only god in the game that has an ability that changes its base AoE size. Other abilities grow over time or can extend their range based on other factors, but Maman's ultimate is the only one that changes its base AoE size. Matikaros. Matikaros is the first completely original character Smite has ever added. Matikaros is simply the Persian word for manticore, and no king of manticores has ever existed in mythology. In fact, there aren't even any named manticores. Maui. Maui is the only god in Smite that doesn't say his name when you select him.
Almost time to start the show!
Medusa. Medusa can make giant statues of Cthulhu and Vamana during their ultimates that look hilarious. Mercury. Mercury is the fastest god in Smite by just 1 point of base movement speed to reference his lore as the fastest god alive. Merlin. Merlin was the first and only triple stand switcher ever added to Smite. Morgan Le Fay. Morgan's 2, Dragonflight, is one of the few abilities in the game that applies the maximum of 4 diminishing return stacks on its own, meaning any future CCs on targets hit by this are 20% of the original duration. This is due to it being a knock-up followed by a push, both of which are true hard CCs that apply 2 stacks of DR each. Mulan. Hitting enemies with Mulan's ultimate grants skill XP towards the corresponding weapon for each hit. Sword for the first hit, spear for the second, and bow for the third. Najah. Najah was the first god in Smite to have a unique basic attack progression that wasn't just 1 times damage and swing time. Neith. Neith's weaves dropped by her passive used to act as vision walls, but this was removed a long time ago. The same used to be true of Artemis's traps. Nemesis. Excluding the VTuber crossover skins, Sweet Justice is the only Nemesis skin that shows her eyes, or at least one of them. Nike. Nike is one of few gods to have a game mode named after her, with Nike's Valiant Victory. Others include Jing Chen's Mountain, the Trials of King Hercules and Shadows over Hercopolis, as well as Fafnir's Wonderland and Persephone's Corrupted Arena. Nox. Similar to Nemesis, Synthweaver, Dragon Priestess, and Queen Bee are the only Nox skins that show her eyes. Nuwa. A funny unmissable one-shot combo exists with Nuwa in combination with Terra. The Terra ults as many enemies as possible, and the Nuwa with at least 3 proc damage items, usually Archmage's Gem, Soul Reaver, and Soul Gem, presses her ult. Since Terra ult has 4 stones, the ult damage plus all 3 proc items trigger the stones immediately and detonates Terra's ult automatically on all enemies hit for massive damage, though to make this truly a one-shot combo, you also need to build a Terra full damage. Nut. Nut was likely planned to be added to the game well before her original release in year 11. Geb had a voice line in place for when he killed Nut since his release, and so it was likely planned for Nut to come out shortly after, or even maybe as a double release, but for whatever reason she was cancelled at the time and only brought back more than 10 years later. Odin. Odin, alongside these others, was one of the original 9 gods in the first ever public showcase of Smite in 2011. That means that Greek, Norse, Egyptian, Chinese, and Hindu gods were all represented at this early stage in Smite's alpha. Olorun. Olorun was the first god in the game to have a time dilation CC, with Bake Kujira getting one much later on. Osiris. Osiris has the highest number of skin pairs in Smite, with 3. The TMNT skins, the Frankenstein skins, and the Night skins. He shares this title with quite a few other gods though. Pele. Pele has the largest self-applied debuff in the entire game, with her ultimate reducing her basic attack damage by 50%, but of course it's for a good reason and it's still an overall massive benefit. Persephone. Persephone was teased a few months before her release as she appeared in the card art of the Prince of Darkness Hades skin. Poseidon. The Kraken is actually a being from Norse mythology, not Greek. This is likely a reference to the famous line, "Release the Kraken" from Clash of Titans. Ra. Ra was the first god in Smite to ever receive a remodel, just 1 year after his initial release. Raijin. Raijin is the only god in the game with a dance emote that doesn't actually dance, instead he plays the drums. Rama. Rama has the smallest circular AoE in the entire game, with the third shot of his ultimate having a radius of 7.5 units, with the next smallest being quite a few abilities that have a radius of 10. Ratatoska. Despite being a male god, Ratatoska is voiced by a woman. He shares this trait with Cupid and Naja. Yes, Naja is male, stop it. Ravan. Ravan was pretty much the undisputed weakest god release ever in Smite. This is how much damage his ultimate did on launch. Scylla. Scylla's dogs all have names. They're called Ajax, Achilles, Cyril, and Zoe. Serket. Hitting Serket's second ability on 2 different targets at once to make them attack each other is one of, if not the single hardest ability to land in Smite. Set. Along with Horus, Ishtar, Morgan Le Fay, and Tyr, Set is one of few gods where another playable god appears in their end of match screen. Also Salad. Shiva. Shiva's ultimate in Smite is believed to be inspired by the ancient traditional default dance in the video game Fortnite. Skadi. Skadi is the first and only god to have a slippery surface CC. Sobek. Blessing of the Nile is one of the few skins in Smite named directly after an ability of the god in question, being Sobek's passive in this case. Sol. In the lore, what we play as Sol is just a projection of herself that fights, while the real Sol continues to be chased across the sky by Fenrir's son Skull. One of her taunts is probably a reference to this.
You can't kill me, I'm not even really here.
Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong is voiced by Sean Schemmel, who voices Son Goku in the Dragon Ball series. Surtur. One of Surtur's jokes, "Do you expect some kind of special reward upon my death?" is of course a reference to him being the fire giant in Smite for over 10 years. Susanoo. The serpent that Susanoo slays in his victory screen is the Yamata no Orochi, sorry if I butchered that, a legendary serpent in Japanese lore. After being expelled from the heavens, Susanoo walked the earth and came upon a family that was forced to sacrifice one of their daughters every year to the serpent. To redeem himself, Susanoo slayed the beast. Sylvanas. Sylvanas' treant Grover is a playable character in another high-res game, Paladins. Terra. Terra is the only instance where her name is used in a completely different god's ability, that being Sylvanas' ultimate, Wrath of Terror. Thanatos. Valkyrie's Rage is one of few gender-bend switching skins in Smite. Some others are Ladybug Kepri, Rotten Rascal Baron Samdi, and Nicol Bolas Tiamat. The Morrigan. The Morrigan is the only god to not refer to themselves as I. This is because she is actually 3 different beings in one, so all of her voice lines reference her as we and us. Thor. The Valkyrie Bride Thor skin is a lore reference to when Thor dressed as Freya to trick a giant into marrying him to retrieve Mjolnir, which had been stolen by the giants.
My resemblance to Freya is uncanny. These frost giant fools won't suspect a thing.
Thoth. Excluding global and infinite range abilities, Thoth has the longest range ability in the entire game, with his ultimate traveling 130 units when fired through his glyph, more than 2 basic attacks worth of range. Tiamat. Tiamat has the most total abilities of any god in the game at 12. The only one that comes close is Merlin with 9. Tsukuyomi. Suku is the only Japanese Smite god to exclusively speak in English for all of their voice lines, with the exception of his ability names like Shingetsu and Mangetsu. Tyr. Tyr has arguably the hardest achievement to get in Smite, killing 15 gods with the damage from his ultimate in one single match. Ula. Alongside Tiamat, Freya, and Tsukuyomi, Ula is one of the few gods that can be both melee and ranged within their kit. Vamana. Vamana's ultimate colossal fury is actually named Vamana_Big Baby in the game files as a reference to his original model. Vulcan. Alongside Skadi's Calder, Vulcan's turret is one of the only abilities in the game theoretically capable of doing infinite damage in one cast. Others can do this too but are more conditional, like Scylla, Charybdis, and Achilles ultimates, or Pele's 3. Xbalanque. As the first Mayan god added to Smite, Xbalanque was released on December 21st, 2012, which was the supposed doomsday predicted by the long count Mayan calendar.
12-21-12. You guys are so gullible.
Xingqian. Xingqian is the only god in the game who can overcap a base stat that others can't, that being HP 5 regen. Yemoja. Alongside Jormungandr and Sylvanas, as well as Hades in his original design, Yemoja is one of only a few guardians that have ranged basic attacks. Ymir. Alongside Artemis, Ymir is one of only 2 gods that does not have a standard recolor skin purchasable with favor. Yu Huang. Yu Huang's name in Chinese directly translates to the Jade Emperor, so in the Chinese version of Smite, his title is changed to the Heavenly Lord instead to avoid repeating. Zeus. Zeus had the first ever mastery skins in Smite. Zhonghui. Zhongneith is the only skin in the game that attempts to be a different god. But that's one random fact for every god in Smite. Got any more facts? Leave them down below, and if they're especially juicy, I'll give them a heart so everyone can see. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.